those interviewers are making some pretty interesting leaps about who we are before the interview has even started.
It's Wednesday and the window is open. In this extended conversation, Brenda Bailey Hughes and I explore the snap judgments that can shape an interview and how to stay grounded when the unexpected happens.
I have heard some crazy stories. I was witness to one of these about that pre-interview moment that you talked about and some post moments. So,
Okay, I love crazy stories, so you got to
okay,
share.
so here's a couple. One person told me about a boss who would intentionally make the interview candidate, sit sort of far away from the interview room. So they had to walk together back to the interview room. And she walked very quickly on their way back to that interview room. And her point was, if this person can't keep up with me in the hallway, they don't move quickly enough for our organization because we have to move fast. Now, that is all sorts of insensitivities to accessibility issues. And I'm not saying that I condone the interviewer's approach by any stretch of the imagination. But to your point, Carla, those interviewers are making some pretty interesting leaps about who we are before the interview has even started. In another situation, I was in a Zoom interview and it was a committee interview. So there were lots of us. And one person had not shown up on time that was on the committee. The candidate was there. And so the committee was just sort of chit-chatting with the candidate, as you would do as you're wasting time waiting for the other member to get there. And then when that member did arrive, it wasn't obvious to me that she'd arrived. You didn't see the Zoom window pop up. And the candidate must not have noticed it either because she just kept talking. She was in the middle of telling us this great story. Those of us that were there are in the middle of a story. She keeps telling the story. When the interview was all over, someone on that committee said, I don't want to hire her. I don't like that she tried to take over the interview from the very beginning. And I thought, what a perceptual difference. To me, she was just being fun and, helping us deal with this awkward moment of we're all sitting in the Zoom room waiting for somebody to show up. I thought she was delightful and voted yes, yes, yes for her. But then we had this other person with this weird perception that she was controlling the interview. And so I think that speaks to knowing your audience, paying attention to the listener, listening, or paying attention to the interviewer, listening so well that you might catch those subtle cues that this person's trying to wrangle us in and get to question number one on the interview guide and move us along, just really being sensitive to that. And then there's one other really sort of legendary story. So I taught at Indiana University for about 30 years. And we have this legendary basketball coach named Bobby Knight. He's since passed, but he was legendary in his time. And there were stories that when he interviewed for team managers, so people who weren't players, but they were going to be very integral to the functioning of this team, and they needed to be organized and responsible and super accountable, he would always walk them out of the interview to their car so that he could kind of snoop around in their car and see if it was a mess. Because he said, if somebody doesn't take care of their own belongings, how can I trust them to take care of the belongings and the importance of this team? So all of those silly stories just to say, I think you're absolutely spot on to remind our listeners that, geez, interviewers are watching for some things that aren't at all about the Q&A happening in that room.
Yeah. It's important to take the time to prepare as much as you can in those ways. Like you said, a lot of that is prep that you've done ahead of time of looking at what message you're actually conveying. Because of course it's more of a stressful, nervous situation for many people. Most people aren't 100% comfortable at all interviews, right? They come in, they're a little bit nervous because hopefully they want what it is they're going for.
Right.
And underneath that stress, that's when other things tend to pop up that are unexpected.
Oh,
So
yeah.
if you aren't being authentic and you aren't truly comfortable and you're in a stressful situation, you may say something that later you're like, oh, I shouldn't have
Why
said
did I say that? That
that,
wasn't
right?
me. Right.
Yes.
That's not how I think. That's not what I believe, but it popped out of your nervousness or out of your anxiety. Yeah. Well, so I suppose some of the prep it is the know the space that you're in as well as you can. Work on those nonverbal and vocalic, those I call them the superficial credibility busters, things that shouldn't matter to people, but that people are using to evaluate us. So again, if you're in the interviewing role, try not to judge people on their posture or how quickly they're speaking or whether they are giggling a little too much, which is a nervous response. Give them some grace for how anxiety producing um, interviews can be. And then if you're in the hot seat, you're the interviewee. Yeah, have worked through some of those mannerisms and superficial cues long before you start interviewing if you can. And then do some anxiety reducing, self-regulating. Use your tools before you walk into that interview. Do your deep breathing, do your power posing in the bathroom before you get in there. Do your positive self-talk. Do the box breathing, 4 breaths in, 4 breaths out, 4 counts of 4 breath. Um, Regulate by looking around the room and noticing 5 things that you see, 5 things that you hear, 5 things that you physically can feel, just as a way of grounding yourself when you're feeling that spiraling tension that could get you. And then I think one of the self-talk pieces that may be so helpful for people in interview situations is I'm interviewing them as much as they're interviewing me.
Yeah.
I think we forget that when we're feeling desperate for a position, but it is true. Like you don't want to take this position if they're not a good match for you.
Yeah. One of the other things that I recommend people do is bring a cup or bottle of water. So you could take a moment and take a sip if you need to before answering a question or as you're going in, just as a way to pause and breathe for that moment.
Yeah. Take a notebook, ask them if it's okay if you take notes, and then you don't want long pauses, but if you're jotting down, interviewers are notorious for asking 3-part questions. I'm going to get through part 2 and have no idea what part 3 was, but a quick note as they're asking that question. And then it also allows you that break from direct eye contact. It allows you to look down, catch your breath for just a second. I think it's a great anxiety management strategy as well as a good listening technique.